So Donald Trump is now the president of the United States, which means he has a lot of things to focus on from his agenda, from mass deportations to imposing tariffs to even maybe taking Greenland. It's a long list of goals and items on his list that he needs to get done. But to get any of it through, he's going to need a large team of people to help him get his things achieved. But as we've covered here on the Ishaan S show previously, some of the people Trump has been picking are, let's say, unique. People with all sorts of interesting backgrounds, from Fox News hosts to people that have shot their own dogs. And so we here at the Ishaan S show are going to do some of the heavy lifting for you and introduce you to the men and women who are going to make decisions about your life every single day. We'll talk about notable moments from their careers, their backgrounds, and stuff any ordinary person probably wouldn't want their boss to know about. This is an Ishaan S show mini-series, Meet the Trump Administration. So today I'm going to tell you the story of a congresswoman. The year is 2016. It's in the middle of the Democratic primary. This congresswoman has made a name for herself as someone who is so progressive. Like, she is pro-environmental sustainability, progressive taxation, criminal justice reform. Like, she is checking all the boxes of the left wing in the Democratic Party that we have seen for so long. In fact, she was so progressive. Like, she came from the 2nd District of Hawaii, not known for being particularly conservative, but she was so progressive that she quit her role in the Democratic National Committee, the DNC, to endorse Bernie Sanders in the 2016 Democratic primary. Like, that's how progressive. And you know Bernie Sanders, he's not particularly close to being a moderate on any issue when it comes to policy. Like, he is as progressive, as left-wing as the Democratic Party gets to see. And she quit. She quit the Democratic National Convention because she was not ready to endorse Hillary Clinton. She didn't want to stay on because the DNC, in her view, was setting up a Hillary Clinton election, and so she was not ready for that, and she wanted to endorse Bernie Sanders. So she stepped down as vice chair of the Democratic National Committee to endorse Sanders, citing her belief that Clinton was too tied to corporate interests, to being a warmonger. And yeah, so obviously, I mean, maybe you know by now, but because you saw the title of the video, but the congresswoman I'm talking about at the time is Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii. She is very well known for her outspoken beliefs today. But back in the day, just a few years ago, she was a progressive bastion who ran for president to be on the Democratic nominee. Like, just a matter of 6 years ago, she was in a Democratic primary running against 19 Democrats, and she was considered on the left. She was considered the progressive side of the Democratic Party. I mean, there's even this one incident where in 2020, in the debate in June of 2019 or July, she took on Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris, who was progressive herself, but Gabbard called her out for being conservative, too conservative when it came to her record as a district attorney in San Francisco. She said, quote, "You put 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations, then laughed about it when you were asked if you ever smoked marijuana." She attacked Harris for her views on, for her hard on crime policies, in her view. But those are just little snippets of the progressive that Tulsi Gabbard was. Who would have thought that just a handful of years later, less than a decade later, she would be Donald Trump's nominee to be Director of National Intelligence? Didn't see that coming, did you? As DNI, Director of National Intelligence, this is a role that is very important. Probably they say one of the important jobs that you'll never hear about, because they are responsible for curating the president's entire intelligence consumption, like what the intelligence that the president consumes on a daily basis. Like it's a big part of the Director of National Intelligence, who's making and arranging all of that, making sure that the right intelligence is getting to the president. So I'm going to read some fast facts about the DNI. All right. Principal advisor advises the president and key councils on national security intelligence. That person is the head of the intelligence community, overseeing 18 intelligence agencies, including the CIA, the NSA, and the FBI's national security and intelligence divisions. She oversees and manages a budget, of $100 billion, produces the daily intelligence briefing to the president's daily brief. This is a document that gets to the Oval Office every single day that the president reads, and it talks about all the problems, all the things going on in the world that this Director of National Intelligence feels the president should know about. And oversees policies for security clearances and classified information. So it is quite the role, and it has to do a lot with intelligence, with secrets and like spying. And if you look at it on paper, it's a pretty cool job. And so Tulsi Gabbard, this one-time very outspoken progressive, is now Donald Trump's nominee to be Director of National Intelligence. And mainly because of her outspoken support for him. And that actually brings us to story number 1 about Tulsi Gabbard, which is her departure from the Democratic Party. So after dropping out of the presidential election, when she was running in 2019, she dropped out in early 2020, endorsed Joe Biden in that race, so this has gone on for a while. Ever since Joe Biden's election, she'd made a veer away from the Democratic Party, slowly distancing herself. But even when she was a Democrat, she was never particularly always on page. She was actually one of the few Democrats that used to go on Fox News, on people like Tucker Carlson's show, and criticize the Democratic Party and leaders like President Obama at the time, and constantly criticize her Democratic rivals on the stage just by calling herself a Democrat. But her departure from the Democratic Party was more formal in October of 2022. Gabbard announced that she was leaving the Democratic Party. She hosted a podcast, actually. We know some of that. So she hosted a podcast, and so she actually released an episode in her podcast called Why I Am Leaving the Democratic Party. And so she said about her departure, quote, "I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that is now under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers." Yikes. Some criticism she had for the party were that she accused the party of promoting divisive racial politics, anti-white racism in her words, undermining civil liberties, because she believes that there's an undermining of civil liberties that the Democrats exclusively have been doing, apparently, and pushing cowardly wokeness. And you might not remember woke because DEI is the new woke, but there was that whole time when woke was the bad word. Anyway, she left the Democratic Party because they were pushing cowardly wokeness. And so in the years since she has quit the Democratic Party, not that she was ever fully a part of it, but in the years since she left the Democratic Party, she has endorsed Republican candidates in the 2022 midterm elections and in the 2024 elections. She became a vocal critic of Democratic leadership, aligning herself slowly more with conservative viewpoints, and even coming to a point of endorsing Donald Trump in the 2024 election, and just weeks before the election, calling herself a Republican. Here's a speech of her just talking about that a few weeks before the election last year.
And it is because of my love for our country, and specifically because of the leadership that President Trump has brought to transform the Republican Party and bring it back to the party of the people and the party of peace, that I'm proud to stand here with you today, President Trump, and announce that I'm joining the Republican Party.
So Tulsi Gabbard made that pretty big shift. look, I've followed Tulsi Gabbard's career for almost 10 years, actually, at this point. I will tell you, like, did I always think of her as like as a odd one out in the Democratic Party? Yes. Did I ever think that she would become a Republican? Probably not. But then again, you have to look at her past and you have to really think about how she's been an odd one out, because she's always been pretty orthodox in her views, unorthodox, excuse me, in her views on some issues. And so that brings us to story number 2. Story number 2 has to do with her views on LGBTQ rights. This has been a stickler for Gabbard in general because it's been mainly focused on her early opposition to even the prospect of it. She was an outspoken critic of same-sex marriage, including working for with her father's organization, the Alliance for Traditional Marriage, that promoted traditional marriage values and conversion therapy in her state of Hawaii. Her dad was an outspoken anti-gay activist and campaigned vigorously for a constitutional amendment in Hawaii that would have enshrined traditional marriage into the state's constitution. And she worked very closely with this whole movement in Hawaii, including expressing concerns about homosexual activists influencing children. She opposed a resolution that condemned anti-gay bullying for kids that were bullied for their identity. But then, conveniently, after coming into Congress, she shifted her views on marriage equality, and very conveniently, after being elected as Hawaii's congresswoman, she moved over. And so by 2012, she began to publicly apologize and support gay marriage in saying, quote, "I regret the positions I took in the past and the things I said. I'm grateful for those in the LGBTQ plus community who have shared their aloha with me throughout my personal journey." She's also co-sponsored, when she was a member of Congress, the Equality Act in Congress. So just like her big pivotal shift from being a progressive Democrat to becoming a Republican cabinet member, she also went from being an incredibly anti-gay activist to becoming a person who sponsored the Equality Act in Congress. I mean, her dad was a big influence in her views on stuff like this back in the day. I mean, his reasoning in some cases for being against gay marriage was that he couldn't marry his daughter, so therefore people should not be able to marry who they wanted to. Odd logic, but you know, it was a different time, maybe. I don't know. But then after quitting the Democratic Party, after, you know, losing that whole need to appease her progressive base, she shifted back in her views. In 2024, Gabbard spoke at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference. She spoke at CPAC, sharing the stage with well-known anti-LGBTQ plus people. She even expressed support for the Don't Say Gay bill that passed in Florida that was a big hot topic. And she criticized gender ideology, expressing concerns about its impact on children and societal norms. But that's story number 2 about Tulsi Gabbard. Now, story number 3 has to do with a little more of an interesting story, incident, like a person. Do you remember Steve Bannon? Maybe not. Steve Bannon was in the first Trump White House. He was chief strategist and a special counselor to President Trump. And he was monumental in shaping a lot of President Trump's first term policies at the start. Like, he was a big component of that. And he played a large role in influencing things that Trump did and what he signed, executive orders, things like that, including Executive Order 13769, or the travel ban, or what they called the Muslim ban, which banned travel from 7 Muslim majority countries. They would argue for security threats, but like, if you look at really the way Steve Bannon used to speak, it was purely for the fact of the identities of the people coming from that country, or from those countries. But he was also a promoter of nationalist economic policies. So, you know, Steve Bannon is like this right-wing character. Like, he's a right-wing character. So Bannon actually had a deep, deep admiration for Gabbard. Like, Steve Bannon seemed to really like her. Bannon expressed respect for Gabbard's anti-establishment stance on foreign policy views. He praised Gabbard as not being a part of one faction or another and constantly being a thorn for Democrats on views of foreign policy. And there were reports that Bannon tried to arrange a meeting after Trump's first election between Tulsi Gabbard and Donald Trump to do something. It's not clear exactly what was discussed, but there's talks that Bannon was trying to find a role for Gabbard in that new administration at the time. So the fact that Donald Trump hired Gabbard this time to be director of national intelligence, it's not like this is just a one-off that happened. This has been something that's been in the works for quite a bit, actually. If you look at the receipts, here's Kamala Harris saying it better than I could.
It's unfortunate that we have someone on the stage who is attempting to be the Democratic nominee for President of the United States, who during the Obama administration spent 4 years full-time on Fox News criticizing President Obama.
That's
who
ridiculous,
has spent full-time criticizing people on this stage as affiliated with the Democratic Party. When Donald Trump was elected, not even sworn in, buddied up to Steve Bannon to get a meeting with Donald Trump in the Trump Tower.
Buddied up to Steve Bannon to get a meeting with Trump after his election. So I should also note some controversies surrounding Bannon. Why not? He co-founded Breitbart News, a platform that has been criticized for promoting far-right nationalist content. And Bannon was also sentenced to 4 months in prison for defying a subpoena related to the January 6th Capitol riot. But it's not just Steve Bannon. Tulsi Gabbard has had weird interactions, relationships with other right-wing figures, like the Adelsons. They're big casino magnates. David Duke, a literal racist, member of the KKK, actually expressed support for Gabbard. Now, to Gabbard's credit, I should note, she completely rejected Duke's endorsement, but that doesn't shy away from the fact that she's saying something that was garnering the attention of people like David Duke. But yeah, that's story number 3, association with Steve Bannon and other right-wing figures. Story number 4 has to do with something you probably have known or heard about Tulsi Gabbard in these confirmation hearings, and that has to do with her meeting with Syria's one-time dictator, Bashar al-Assad. You should know about Bashar al-Assad. He was a dictator in Syria who was known for being particularly brutal to his own people, such as launching chemical weapons on his own people. That's what you should know about Bashar al-Assad. In a police state, like a police state where nothing happened without him saying okay and whatnot, but he was always a bad guy, not a good leader. You should know that he was ousted from his role as dictator of Syria actually just in December of 2024, so a couple months ago. But anyway, story number 4 is January of 2017, so 8 years ago. Gabbard traveled without telling many people in her own party's leadership, as a congresswoman, traveled to Syria to meet with Bashar al-Assad. Now, this meeting was described as being unplanned, the meeting between Assad and Gabbard. But when talking through it, when interviewing staffers, there's this question of whether or not it was all unplanned, because she actually met Assad twice in this meeting, or in this trip of hers. And she also met with other Syrian officials. So this idea that it was a one-off and that she happened to meet the president of Syria in a police state as, heavily overseen and, run with such an iron fist as Syria, like the way she just got to meet the president of Syria like that. There have been doubts about that. but she did meet with him twice. And her reasoning for the trip and meeting with Assad was that she wanted to find, different parts of the argument in Syria and try to find a peaceful resolution to the conflict that was happening there. Okay, so she happened to meet with Bashar al-Assad, in her view, to solve problems about how Bashar al-Assad was killing his own people. There's also funding controversy behind this. Apparently, her trip was allegedly funded by a nonprofit organization or a political group, which Gabbard then had to reimburse later because of ethics violations. So there you go. And public and political reaction, she was criticized she faced bipartisan criticism for her trip to Syria and for meeting with Assad because, again, Assad was a war criminal. He's now practicing, I don't know what he's doing now. He was a doctor, actually, before being dictator, fun fact. He's now in Russia because he had to escape to Russia because Russia is the only place where they'd take him in. But she met with him, a war criminal, and she had to defend meeting a war criminal, emphasizing the importance of direct dialogue in pursuing peace. She's also she was, as a member of Congress, against bringing in Syrian refugees into the country, Syrian refugees leaving the conflict that Bashar al-Assad was promoting. But in 2019, she actually doubled down on an interview on MSNBC saying, quote, "Assad is not the enemy of the United States because Syria does not pose a direct threat to the United States." Of course, at the time, that was categorically false, as Syria was a concern to the United States' safety, especially for the geopolitical role it played, including with our relationship with Russia. So either she didn't know that or she had other beliefs, but whatever it is, that's story number 4 about Tulsi Gabbard, her meeting with Bashar al-Assad. And then story number 5 today. Story number 5 has to do with, you guessed it, Russia. Russia is it's a tough topic for Gabbard when we talk about it because she's been accused of parroting Russian talking points about a few key policy matters. Not that she's ever been proven to be like anything related to Russia, but like her own views, her own personal views do very much apparently align with Vladimir Putin and Russian state media's points. I'll tell you why. So on February 22nd, 2022, I think, or February 24th, I can't remember exactly what day, but the night Ukraine was invaded by Russia, a free and sovereign country invaded by Russia. Bipartisan condemnation. Democrats, Republicans were all saying, how dare Russia go into an independent and free country like this? That same night, on a tweet, Gabbard actually blamed the United States for Russia's invasion of Ukraine, because it's our fault that Vladimir Putin felt the need to invade a free and sovereign country. She wrote, quote, "This war and suffering could have been easily avoided if the Biden administration / NATO had simply acknowledged Russia's legitimate security concerns. Not that it's in America's interests to expand NATO, to combat Russian aggression, to combat Russian influence. No, it's America's fault that we were trying to pursue our own security and that we were not considering Russia's feelings, Vladimir Putin's feelings." She's expressed concerns about US-funded laboratories, biolabs in Ukraine that directly echoes narratives promoted by Russian state media. And her reception in Russian media has been highlighted as a dissent in America. Like they've said, wow, they've praised Tulsi Gabbard for her statements and like how well they've matched with the Kremlin's talking points. And they've used clips of her, and I'm not going to play them on my own show because I don't want to promote Russian state media on my show, but like you can go find it. You can go find it online. There are video clips of Russian state media literally using clips of Tulsi Gabbard saying, hey, look at who this person is in America. She's kind of, she got some points to make. But yeah, that's story number 5. And so that's what we have on Tulsi Gabbard. As of the recording of this, she is very close to being confirmed as the next director of national intelligence, which I will note, pretty remarkable career for someone like Tulsi Gabbard, going from her work in Hawaii to being a Democratic progressive congresswoman to being a presidential candidate, and now somehow serving as director of national intelligence in a Republican administration led by Donald Trump, someone she tried to run against 6 years ago. But that is this week's edition of Meet the Trump Administration. If you liked my commentary, then go ahead and subscribe to the Ishaan S Show on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram and X. Check out theishaanshow.com for more Ishaan S Show content. Check out our bi-weekly episodes on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And stay tuned, as always, for more stuff happening in our world, because it's always happening, and you never know what comes next. But thank you so much for joining us today. I'll see you in the next one.